Hello, Sweet Nation. My name is Brendan Dunlop, and this is Inside the Box, my brand new show coming to you twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays, where I'll talk everything soccer on both sides of the pond with as much Canadian influence as you would expect from me. All the big stories, all the big players, all the big moments, everything that really matters, and everything that you've missed over the years as the way you've consumed have changed a little bit. So I'm very happy to be doing this show powered by Jackpot City Casino, jackpotcity.ca, to be able to fill your ear holes with more soccer content in this 2026 World Cup year, the biggest year for this sport in our lifetime. And it's been an amazing year for Canadian players. It will be an amazing year as the World Cup draws closer. And of course, with the transfer window just closing, it was a busy time for Canadian players. 9 players who are regularly in Jesse Marsch's Canadian men's national team moved in January. Ali Ahmed's been off to a great start at Norwich. And now he's got another Canadian sharing some of the headlines in the league championship, in Cyle Larin. And what a debut it was for Cyle Larin, the maligned striker who's been criticized by Canadian supporters, criticized by Real Mallorca fans since moving there, never found his footing at Feyenoord, gets a deadline day move to Southampton, who are in a different position than they would like to be. They're not pushing for a title. They're not pushing for promotion. They're hoping to get back into the playoff places and hoping to find a goal scorer that can take them there. And while he has struggled to fill the back of the net in recent months, and in recent years, you could say, hasn't kept consistent form, a dream debut for Cyle Larin. 3 minutes into his Saints debut, he came on in the 67th minute off the bench and delivered what ended up being the match-winning goal for the Saints. Like, you really couldn't ask for anything better. And I feel if you're Ross Stewart, who probably already felt as though maybe his place was in danger with the attraction of Larin, let alone the actual arrival of Larin, he's going to cement his place in that team and contribute more. And 3 minutes in to have gotten a goal, you saw how much it means to him if you saw the highlights and the replay or any of the photographs of Cyle Larin. This was a huge weight off of the shoulders to score against Watford in a big game for the Saints as they're chasing Watford in the league table and pushing on to try and get into a championship spot. I couldn't be happier to see Cyle Larin have that type of start because he's the type of player that Jesse Marsch plays to build his confidence. And by that, I mean, there are a lot of players, especially goal scorers, that need to feel respected and supported by their management, sure, and their team. They need to feel confident out there. And when they are at peak confidence, they put the balls in the back of the net. And Cyle Larin has been someone who, because of injuries, because of form, because of so much club movement, that's what it's very easy to forget with a player like Cyle Larin, that he's moved a lot of clubs since the 2022 World Cup. And in this format next to Jonathan David, heading into 2025, the idea of Cyle Larin not being the striker next to Jonathan David was almost unthinkable. But as we saw last year with the emergence of Tani Oluwase, who got his move to Villarreal, with the emergence of Promise David, who became a Canadian international and helped Union Saint-Gilloise win the Belgian league title for the first time in 90 years. There's competition now in that Canadian men's national team for Cyle Larin, and that place is certainly not safe and certainly not his. He has to be performing. He has to be scoring at club level. So to come out the gate and get that debut opening goal for the Saints just 3 minutes into his league championship debut, couldn't be happier for the guy. And he said, too, that he's living a dream. And most North American players feel this way about England. There's this romanticizing about the beautiful game and the English game that has always existed. From the 90s, when players were going over there at the beginning of what was this emergence of North American talent, and there was some American players who had a little more success and more opportunities than Canadian players had. And Southampton are a team that want to be back in the Premier League. And if Cyle Larin can secure a permanent move there and be a part of that as they push forward, that would be fantastic. But he's also someone that would be in the shop window for a team that's already in the Premier League, or maybe a team that would be winning promotion in the very near future. And in general, just the better certain Canadian players do, the better it is for all Canadian players. And the same goes for Americans that put a bigger spotlight on things. We'll definitely see that in the Serie A with the success of Weston McKennie and Christian Pulisic. And now you're getting that in the championship with Ali Ahmed at Norwich and Cyle Larin at Southampton. So a fantastic start for Cyle Larin, and someone who we'll be talking about a lot here on Inside the Box as things go forward. Because heading into this World Cup year, and that 5-man offense and 5-man attacking core that Jesse Marsch has, you can play without Cyle Larin. And certainly if he's not at his best, there are several other players that you would put in there. I do think that there are 3 players competing for the 5th spot in that attacking core. And if you want to put Cyle Larin down to, let's say, 4th, then you do have Daniel Jebbison, Theo Bair kind of competing for that 5th spot. And I would even throw Jason Russell-Rowe in there, who's just made a move to Toulouse and also had a very good debut in Liga after his move from Columbus Crew. There's a lot of competition for those attacking places, but I still think Cyle Larin at his best is the best option next to Jonathan David. Now, whether we have Cyle Larin at his best over the next few months, we'll have to wait and see. March is going to be such a big tell. And if Cyle Larin is performing at the level that we saw in just 20 minutes of action for Southampton, I got a feeling that's only going to get better and better. And I have a feeling that will put him in a very confident position heading into that March window to play next to Jonathan David and just show what he's got and show exactly what Jesse Marsch already knows is in the tank, but that he's able to do that over the next few months leading into the World Cup. Because if it's Italy in that opening game, I think you want someone that presses the way he does to be able to make an inexperienced Italian back line a little nervous. And then obviously someone that would put the ball in the back of the net. And Cyle Larin's shown already that he can do that in England. We'll see if he can do it in the World Cup. Speaking of England, the Premier League, it's been an unbelievable season, unless you're a Liverpool supporter. But the last few weeks have been nuts, really since the turn of the year. January has felt in a lot of ways like a brand new Premier League season. All of the drama at Liverpool seems to have, the narrative has changed a little bit at Anfield, but the drama is never far away. And man, the headline match certainly delivered this weekend with Manchester City pulling out a 2-1 win over Liverpool, thanks to more heroics from Erling Haaland, who is going to be an absolute beast and a force to be reckoned with at the World Cup. I cannot wait to watch Norway. I'm also very thrilled that Canada did not draw Norway in their group, because that would have made things very challenging for Canada, who already will have their hands full, whether or not that's Italy in the opening matchup. But for Man City to go to Liverpool and look as though they were going to be digging themselves out of a big hole after Dominic Szoboszlai scored what was an incredible free kick to put the Reds up in the first place. Well, they always make us wait this late. It's either a draw with these two when the fixture comes up, or you're waiting past 70 minutes to really see any goals. That's just like, that's the expected play. If you were looking at a gambling play every week, that's probably what I would say, that no goals in the first hour. And we got 3 in the last 15 minutes, which really made this for a dramatic day. But Erling Haaland canceled that out, first assisting Bernardo Silva with a great header flick. It's exactly what you want from a big man. That's one of the skill sets that he doesn't get enough credit for. Obviously, he scores a lot of goals. You expect Erling Haaland to bulge the old onion bag on a consistent basis. And if he's not doing it a goal a game, you kind of feel like that he's failing, even though he has delivered and performed for City this season and has them, within a shout of Arsenal for the Premier League title. But then that goal to win it, that's exactly why he's paid the big bucks. That's exactly why Erling Haaland is one of the biggest forces in the Premier League and a front man that other opponents and other teams are absolutely terrified by. I think that Erling Haaland, the expectation for him to score a goal a game or above a goal a game is one of the reasons he's not as appreciated. And because at times, he is a target man. He's not the creative number 10 or pseudo number 10 as someone like Mo Salah can be. He's someone that is waiting to receive the ball, but his finishing ability is second to none in the Premier League. And there's a reason that he's always the highest priced fantasy player if you are partaking in fantasy Premier League, and someone who will always hold that. The way Man City are playing now, it does feel as though not having the pressure of leading from the top has made them more comfortable. And it's easy to say, there's now the calendar turns to February, and in general, Pep Guardiola will always make excuses or transfer the pressure onto the others. And it's very easy to do with Arsenal because Arsenal historically haven't handled the pressure very well. I really think that with this fixture list coming up for Manchester City, they're just going to get better, which is scary because they made some big additions in the January transfer window with the addition of Semenyo. I think they're going to be a more balanced team. They're going to be a bit of a more balanced attack. And the way that they've looked with Erling Haaland at the moment, or in the last couple of months, I really think they're just getting better. So to see them on 50 points, despite having dropped those 5 games and losing the 5 matches in the fashion in which they did, you wouldn't want to bet against City at the moment. And you certainly wouldn't want to bet against Erling Haaland. And, there'll be a lot of people that say, yeah, but the derby and having lost to Manchester United in the fashion that they did, that's probably the real City. There's still plus 27 goal differential. There's still a team that you will bag a couple of goals a game, even if they have to wait as late as they did on the weekend against Liverpool to do it. They're not a team that you would feel comfortable betting against. And it sets up next for a matchup against Fulham on Saturday in the Premier League, which I think a lot of people would expect another 3 points for Man City. And it's just about now this chase with Arsenal and Arsenal not dropping points. And when it comes to the team they're chasing, Arsenal, a 3-0 victory, put them 9 points clear for the day before the City played, a 3-0 win over Sunderland. And you look at Gyökeres, you look at this offense, and I feel like Arsenal still have more in them. And the criticism about this being an unattractive way to win the Premier League and how they're not wowing the crowds the way you'd expect, and certainly not the way that the Invincibles did or the Arsenal Premier League winning teams of the past, they're still doing it efficiently. And so a 3-goal output, albeit against Sunderland, will, I think, relieve some of that pressure and take some of the heat off of Gyökeres and some of the heat off of Miguel Arteta. But 8 goals in 23 games, I think Gyökeres has had a pretty good start. The fact that he's not a highlight reel machine, the fact that he does sometimes look like he's running in jeans out there, which is one of the biggest criticisms, but also one of the best criticisms that I've seen online. It's easy to harp on the guy, obviously with the money that Arsenal spent to bring Gyökeres from Sporting as well, and the fact that everybody doubts performances in the Portuguese league that may not translate as well into the Premier League. I think Gyökeres has been a pretty good signing for Arsenal, and we'll settle into this. The fact that he's leading them in goals at the moment, the fact that they're getting multiple goal scorers to be able to rack up the points the way they have, that's why Arsenal are in a very good position. Doesn't mean that there's not a reason to be worried that they'll see that 9-point gap, 9 points between Arsenal and Aston Villa, that is, disappear, and why perhaps there are some who think that Aston Villa still have a chance at the Premier League title. We have seen Arsenal, obviously, erase those gaps as the season has got hotter and the pressure has gotten hotter. But I think that this is a different Arsenal team, and they don't seem as affected. And we've obviously seen their comeback ability, that as long as they win the matches they're supposed to, and they improve against those teams they're expected to beat, Sunderland being a great example, they're only going to get stronger. Trossard's still contributing. He's got 5 goals this season. Zubamendi has contributed with 5 goals. And as I say, an 8-goal output at this point of February from Gyökeres, I think that's pretty good. He's someone that's going to be in double digits soon. He's someone that, we wouldn't be surprised if he ends up on 15 by the season ends. And I think when the season started, 15 was the floor. And maybe that's too low, but 15 for a player that helps you win the Premier League title for the first time since 2004, yeah, that's hero status, at least on Arsenal Fan TV. Plenty of heroes in the Aston Villa squad who is sitting in 3rd place. It's still a fantastic season for Villa, but it's getting harder. And I don't think it's going to get any easier for them as well. It's difficult to compete on multiple fronts. I think Aston Villa will look at the Europa League this season as a real opportunity to win a trophy, and they should. And that the Premier League and the fantasy of winning the Premier League was great for a few weeks. And a lot of Aston Villa fans may hate to hear me say this, but it always was a bit more of a pipe dream and a real deep fantasy for Aston Villa. And finishing in the top 4, albeit not the trophy that people want to celebrate or many people want to accept, for Aston Villa, finishing in the top 4 does really feel like that. And it gives them an opportunity to be more aggressive in the transfer window, to play in the Champions League again, having done so just once a couple of years ago, just once in this Premier League era. I do think it's impressive the way that they have played, although it can be frustrating the points in which they drop. And against Bournemouth at the weekend, this will be another frustrating moment for Aston Villa fans when they sit and dissect how those points fell away, because it did seem like that matchup against Bournemouth provided Villa with an opportunity. Mind you, scoring 20 minutes in also provides you with a big opportunity. But I really did think that 11 stacked up better for Aston Villa than we saw, and then how it played out. And that's the frustrating point, because this isn't the first time that you've said that this season. And then Ryan, brand new signing for Bournemouth, gets the equalizer, takes a point back for the Cherries, and Aston Villa couldn't find the winning goal. And that's been the frustrating thing for Villa supporters, is that when Villa have looked strong and scored early, they're not able to take advantage or up the ante to be able to come away with the points. At least not all the time. They've stolen quite a few games of the death as well. I think there's quite a few matches that seemed like if you were trying to beat the traffic or you'd flipped off the game a few minutes early, you'd have missed some serious drama, because they have been capable and shown this season that they are able to stick their foot on the throats of their opponents and take points when you least expect it. But against Everton, against Bournemouth, the 2 losses at home, that's what will have Villa fans who had hoped this Premier League title challenge was possible and was real, feeling really deflated. And yes, I'm one of those people. If you've listened to me, you know my Aston Villa bias, but I think it's pretty balanced. So as you continue to listen to Inside the Box, you can let me know exactly how balanced you think I might be and how fair I am when it comes to my team. Because in general, I think I could be a little harsh on my teams. This exists in all sports. And when I used to do Sportsnet Central and the Tigers were really bad, I think you could definitely tell through the air. It's either I'd lost a bet on them, or one of the Tigers players had dated one of my ex-girlfriends. Might have been the suspicion because of how harsh I was. But when it comes to Villa, I think I'm a little fairer when it comes to my dissection of them. But I've always felt, and this comes from my biased experience of having done shows on Sirius Satellite Radio, that there's more of an intersection between the American national team game and the Canadian national team game than the American and or Canadian media will often give the attention to. And I've said this, and I've gotten huge arguments in our Sportsnet newsroom back in 2018 when the U.S. failed to qualify for the tournament, that had such a negative impact on soccer in Canada, because it meant the U.S. men's national team wasn't on U.S. TV bringing in soccer ad dollars, and the Canadian television executives that very much pay attention to that think that reflects the sport on this side of the border. And you've kind of seen that in the investment from legacy media in big box soccer content. And I hope that 2026 is a turning point where not only in big box media, but in other independent production houses and in a growing swath of gambling influenced or independent media, you see that there is not only investment and attention, but a recognition that it's a very splintered fan consumption, because the sport is so incredibly diverse and there's so many different leagues, but that doesn't mean that it's not being consumed on an aggregate. And if you put it all together, on both sides of the border, you see how much consumption that there's been. And I think the U.S. men's national team drives the business side of things on this side of the border in Canada, more so than some people give it credit to. So when I see Weston McKennie scoring goals, with or without Jonathan David, I think that ends up having a trickle-down effect and is good for Canadians. And when I talk to scouts and when I talk to agents and when I talk to people involved in football clubs, they do say that there is a changing of the tide in Europe, where even some American players will hear this benefit because Alphonso Davies has done so well at Bayern Munich, who got a big win over Hoffenheim at the weekend as well, because Jonathan David did so well in France and got his move to Juventus. So there's far more synergy at a time when Canadians and Americans maybe have never been more divided. There's far more synergy when it comes to the beautiful game and where we are heading into 2026. And that has me excited. Quick shout out to our sponsor, jackpotcitycasino.ca. I'm going to hit the slots right now, okay? But I've got a question for you as I play Wacky Panda. Will Cyle Larin or Ali Ahmed score more goals in the championship? Who do you think? Who's going to bag more before the end of the season? Which Canadian? Come on, Panda Man, let's go. $6 winner. You know, I got a feeling most of you will say Cyle Larin because he is a striker, but 2 goals already from the former Vancouver Whitecaps man. I think Ali Ahmed is impressed at Norwich so far, so I'd be interested to hear what you think. And another winner, $6. Let's go. So let us know on Instagram, let us know on Twitter, which Canadian you think will score more in the championship. Big moments, big kicks, and 0 second chances. Check out jackpotcitycasino.ca. Spin responsibly. Now let's get back to Inside the Box. So the January transfer window came with all the drama that Canadian media really wanted and Canadian media really needs when it comes to covering players. Stephen Eustáquio's move to LAFC was confirmed on Friday, and I got to be honest, I'm still digesting this because I really want to see Stephen Eustáquio competing in the best leagues in the world. And this is not a shot at Major League Soccer because he is going to, I think, the best situation in MLS. And that includes Miami because that is not the best situation. It's the best team on paper. Actually, it's not really even the best team on paper. It's the most appealing or the most attractive team on paper. And Inter Miami will contend for the title this year, and they're going to win matches, and they might throw multiple trophies in the cabinet again. But I really think that the best situation is where Stephen Eustáquio has found himself in LA. Under Marc Dos Santos, playing and training with Son Heung-min every day. Denny Bouanga's still there for the time being. And now, Marc Dos Santos, who many people don't know is a Canadian head coach, a Portuguese-Canadian manager, has himself a nice little Canadian contingent in Hollywood. He's brought Hollywood North to actual Hollywood with Jacob Schaffelberg, who arrived this year, with Mathieu Choinière, who arrived on loan from Grasshopper Zurich midseason, and then LAFC made sure to put pen to paper on that transfer and make that permanent earlier this winter. You've got Ryan Raposo is there as well to add some more Canadian content to LAFC. He played a few games last season, and then they signed him as a free agent here in preseason. He's been training with them, and now Stephen Eustáquio will arrive on loan from Porto. I think this is a great situation. We didn't know the terms of the deal. There was rumors when it was announced on transfer deadline day that this was happening, that it would be a €7 million buy, which seemed like an absolute steal. At the same time, I wasn't certain that Porto really wanted to let him go or were willing to cash in that moment. And I also didn't think that a long-term stay in MLS, even given how great that situation is in LA, was the best move for Eustáquio. So I was curious to see how it played out. And when it was finalized, to me, this stacks up as being a very good situation. The contract is only until the end of June, which really allows him to be involved leading up to the World Cup, to be active. He's going to be an absolute engine and an absolute linchpin in that midfield. And then the clause is to have that extended through to the end of this season, which is the last full February to December MLS calendar year that we're ever going to have, which in its own right is wild to say because I still haven't digested as I record this show in Toronto and it's minus 18 degrees Celsius outside, that we're going to a summer to spring calendar for real. But in this edition, in a full 2026 calendar, to have Stephen Eustáquio even for 6 months, but potentially for the full season, is a great situation for LA to be in and a really, really good spot for him to get to his best, to find his form, to find some rhythm, to find the confidence that all players need, although he's a player I think that always seems to have it whether he's playing or not. And he has that leadership in the change room that makes him a very coveted player by any coach who is blessed to work with him. Now Marc Dos Santos will get that opportunity. And I think that he can put himself in a very good situation, either to find another situation in Europe or to become a justified and well-paid designated player in Major League Soccer. He's 29 years old. He's got some miles in the body, but Stephen Eustáquio has so much to offer in midfield. And Canadian fans know this. Jesse Marsch knows this, that midfield for Canada is different when he is not there. And while others like Mathieu Choinière, who will now be his club teammate, Nathan Saliba, who's having a very good transition to life in Belgium with Anderlecht, there are supportive pieces in that midfield now. Of course, Ismail Kone, who's also had a great debut season in Italy, Serie A with Sassuolo, and has made that move permanent. Canada's midfield is very, very strong, but Stephen Eustáquio can be the most impactful player on the pitch in a Canada shirt on any match day. And in order to be that, he has to be playing all the time and have an important role in his club team. And he'll find that in LA now. So I think this situation works out great for him. It works out very good for LA. They will feel, I think, not cheated, but they will be very disappointed, I think, if it doesn't work out that Stephen Eustáquio sticks around for the full season because they want to be contending for our MLS Cup. They want to be challenging into Miami at every turn. And the way this LAFC squad is constructed now, under Mark Dos Santos, who was working under Steve Cherundolo as an assistant for the last 4 years. And while they came up short and were frustrated last year to lose to the Vancouver Whitecaps in the MLS Cup playoffs, everybody expects LAFC to be contending atop the Western Conference this year and to be contending with Inter Miami come the playoffs and for MLS Cup. And Stephen Eustáquio will help you do that. Even if you only get 4 months of him, and then 6 months in the leading up to June before the World Cup break, I think LAFC will put themselves in a very, very good position. And Stephen Eustáquio is destined to play a huge role there and will be a huge part of that. And he's someone that really needed a move. And if MLS was on the table, I think it's the best situation. As much as Toronto FC fans may have expected, given that he grew up 4 hours away in Leamington, that his brother Mauro is coaching the Canadian Premier League team, formerly known as York United, but now rebranded to Inter Toronto FC. There's a lot of people that thought BMO Field would be a good fit for him. And Toronto FC certainly would have benefited with having that engine in midfield. The spine of the team is very important to Jason Hernandez, the general manager, and Robin Fraser, something that both men have talked about at length. You can see that from the acquisitions that they've made over the last 8 months. But this winter, the addition of Walker Zimmerman, Jose Cifuentes last year, Jordi Mihailovic, of course. The middle spine of the pitch is very important for TFC, and to have put Stephen Eustáquio in there would have been a dream come true. And whether those conversations were had or whether that was a possibility, I got to be honest, I don't know. And that may or may not come out because the ship has sailed from the likes of things. But this LAFC situation, as much as I would have loved to have seen Stephen Eustáquio in Toronto, and we know how good he looks in red, LAFC is a very, very good spot for him. So I'm excited for the start of the season, and it's just another reason to stay up late. Those 8:30 local kickoffs, which is 11:30 Eastern time, when LAFC are doing it on a Friday night in the summer, or as early as May when it's already hot out there. Definitely worth waiting up for, and I'll be watching it. Another thing to watch, especially for Toronto FC fans, is how many former Toronto FC players or how many Toronto connections end up in New Jersey at Red Bull New York because of the heavy Toronto and Canada connections there. Now that Michael Bradley is running the show as the head coach, his first MLS head coaching gig, his first head coaching job. And the head of sport is Canada and Toronto FC legend Julian de Guzman, TFC's first designated player, promoted from sporting director to head of sport officially. You got to think that the two of them had been plotting for a while as to who to add to the pieces, who to add to this team as they both try and hit the ground running after what was a frustrating playoff-less season for the Red Bulls, who do have expectations of making the playoffs absolutely every season. That is the floor for the Red Bulls. So they want pieces they're familiar with. They want guys with tools that can fill some holes that they have. And Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty is the latest person to tick some of those boxes. And I think that it's a great situation for JMR. CF Montreal announced the trade on Monday. There was official with Wiki Carmona going the other way. The midfielder will join Montreal, and hopefully for Marco Donadel and that Montreal side who started the season so poorly, they can find their footing. It's a good young player to add before the season. He won't have had a full preseason run here with the season starting in a couple of weeks, but still to get in there before opening day is an advantage for any team. And the same goes for Marshall-Rutty, who will show up in New Jersey and a team that's looking to contend in the Eastern Conference, and a team that I think will have an advantage in the familiarity that Marshall-Rutty has with head coach Michael Bradley, having been teammates at Toronto FC for so long. It's easy to forget, because he's not 22 yet, that Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty is an MLS veteran. He made his debut at 15 years old, and this will be his third team in a year. It'll be his fourth MLS team. He was on loan at Charlotte FC last year from CF Montreal. It seems like it's a good move for CF Montreal, and it seems like it's a very good situation for the player. We've seen how Raheem Edwards did at the Red Bulls and has slotted in as a MLS veteran, as a wingback. And that's the advantage that you have with Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty for Michael Bradley. He knows he's someone he could deploy higher up the pitch, that he could use in midfield, but also has become a very lethal fullback, and with a lot of the same skill sets that we applaud and love Alphonso Davies for. Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty is fast. He's not threatened defensively under pressure. His defensive game has been improving year after year. Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty showing up at the Red Bulls, I think, is a very good spot for him. And maybe not playing in Canada, as we saw playing for Dean Smith and Charlotte, is a good situation for him. He got a call up again to the Canadian men's national team. He was involved in camp with Jesse Marsch for the first time in January, and got to play against Guatemala in that fixture in LA, funny enough. And I think you're going to see a lot more of Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty. That's someone that in the lead up to 26 we talked about as perhaps someone playing a part in the Canadian national team in 26. He's very highly unlikely to. However, he's someone that can be a regular fixture and a mainstay in the 2030 team. And finding some good club form at the Red Bulls this season, I think, will help put him back in that program and put him on track to get to that point where he is a regular and gets a starter. And it starts with just starting on a team that's winning and learning. And the Red Bulls are in that situation this year where they're going to be doing both. Learning how to play under a new manager, learning to adjust with a mix of talent. Emil Forsberg is still going to be the talisman for the Red Bulls. That's a very good person to be defending against in training every day for Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty, which can't be lost when you're talking about these young players, and particularly a player like him with a wealth of experience. He's played against some and trained with some fantastic players, and some players who are better than Emil Forsberg. But to have that every single day will only better him. So that is a great situation for Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty to be in. Sticking with MLS, to the other side of the continent, it seems as though there's finally a good enough situation for the Vancouver Whitecaps. They've accepted the province of British Columbia's deal to stay at BC Place for the 2026 season. And there's been some concessions made by the BC government, who were surprised that it seemed as though it wasn't enough for the Vancouver Whitecaps, and that there was a bit of pushback into the offer. Just to kind of recount how the few days had gone, or the last week, Axel Schuster, the CEO and sporting director of the Vancouver Whitecaps, held a public availability and released a statement to some Vancouver media saying that they felt things were really bad with BC and the company that operates BC Place, known as Pavco, and that they didn't see a long-term situation being possible, because in the short term, it was unfeasible to play at BC Place given those conditions. And Axel Schuster himself, who can be a very optimistic German, said that he wasn't optimistic anymore about the Whitecaps' long-term future in Vancouver. Fast forward to later that day, or I believe it was the next day, where the province of British Columbia and Pavco said that they would operate BC Place at net zero, which would allow the Whitecaps to have between $1 million and $1.5 million in benefits from the stadium. Now, that's annually, not $1.5 million match day, which you think is what perhaps a team with Thomas Muller and a stadium where they can have sellout crowds of 28,000 that they might return. That's just not the economics of Vancouver. And the economics have put them in the situation where not only is the team for sale and has been since the end of 2024, but where even this new deal where they are using BC Place now for free is not enough for the Whitecaps. And Schuster came out after this saying, look, the shortfall for this team is still about 30 to 40 million. There's a lot of other things that need to be done here for the Whitecaps to get to a point where they're operating in a favorable position, not only for their current operation, but to actually be able to sell the team and potentially sell the team to someone who wants to keep them in Vancouver. At least this is a step now. They've accepted this deal. They're going to play at BC Place for 2026. The province did make some concessions, and perhaps there'll be more. It now seems as though, I think the province had come out and said too that pay will be about $2.5 million. It works out. Whether that's eventually the case, of course, that's tied to the operation of the stadium and game day operations. But given the cost of everything, fans know, and inflation, $2.5 million seems more likely, given an initial maybe undersold projection of $1.5 million. The Whitecaps have a bit of stability and perhaps a little bit more clarity than they did last week. And Whitecaps supporters can feel a little less stress. So that in itself is positive. But whether there's a long-term situation and a long-term future, the province has also said they're not going to use taxpayer dollars to fully fund that stadium, where the proposed memorandum and to fully fund the stadium at Hastings Park in East Vancouver, which would be a great situation on the grounds of the PNE for the Whitecaps to have a brand new stadium and to have the Vancouver Rise involved and perhaps have some other entities involved. So it's not just an 18-game operation, which I think makes taxpayer dollars a conversation that can be had. That's not one that the province of British Columbia has wanted to have over the recent decades, and not one that they are willing to have now, even though it seems that's what the Whitecaps have been trying to, the corner the Whitecaps have been trying to push them into. They're settled for 26, and hopefully something can come together for the construction of that stadium, because it would be a tragedy for the Whitecaps to leave Vancouver. At least that's not going to happen right now. But we'll see how 26 plays out. 27 does feel like a nervy period. Speaking of shortfalls and reasons to be nervous, the World Cup will be here in 150 days, less. And Boston has a real situation at Gillette Stadium. The town of Foxborough, who's putting all of the final things together and understands that there's a demand for increased security and the request from FIFA that certain parameters are met. This is the case in all 16 host venues, in the case every major games. But there's an $8 million price tag associated with this. And the town of Foxborough has been waiting for months for someone, either FIFA or US Soccer, to delegate funds and designate where this comes from. And no one has done that. So the town of Foxborough, and if you've ever been to Boston or dealt with people from Boston, I think the one beautiful thing, depending on which side of the cards you are, is they can be very bluntly honest. And the town of Foxborough has done just that, saying like, look, if there's no money, there's not going to be games. We're not going to front the money and have you reimburse us later. Like, that's not how this works. It's $8 million, and we need the cash first and know where the cash is coming from before we grant this license to run these World Cup games at Gillette Stadium, which is wild, having just seen the Patriots lose in the Super Bowl. I know how important Boston is as a city in the American sports structure, and how important Boston will be as a city for this 2026 World Cup, that they're in a situation now where it's the cost and the admin that is holding things up and potentially could be a real pitfall. So I have no fear that this will work itself out. This always seems to with major events. We had the stress in Milan over the 2026 Olympics and the Olympic ice hockey arena that apparently still wasn't fully completed when teams were in there practicing this week in the lead up to the games. The Women's Tournament had opened, and every Canadian watching this knows that Team Canada plays their opening game on Thursday. Things work themselves out. Those games have gone off. The competition has been good. They haven't had to cancel games because of the ice. The operations of things in the lead up always seem very stressful. But when it comes to the high stakes that the Olympics and the World Cup will be, it always seems to work itself out. So I feel as though there will be World Cup games in Boston. Not to worry, but I do love the stance taken by the town of Foxborough that, hey, somebody's got to pay this bill and it's not going to be us. I do very much like that attitude. And hopefully you like the attitude of the show. We're just getting started. This is episode 2 of Inside the Box, powered by Jackpot City Casino. Every week, we'll have a brand new show for you. Mondays and Thursdays is when we'll be recording. We'll have some guests. I'll speak to some former Canadian players and people who you know very well. Dwayne De Rosario, I'd love to have a new conversation with him since we did the book in 2021. His life has changed considerably. He's got 2 sons playing professionally in Major League Soccer now, following in his footsteps. Dwayne De Rosario, one of MLS's top 25 greatest players of all time. And now he's got a goalkeeper and a striker carrying his legacy in Major League Soccer. Jose De Rosario at Seattle had a great season for the Sounders, someone I'd love to get in conversation with and have on the show perhaps as well. And Adisa De Rosario is now one of 2 goalkeepers vying for the number 1 gloves in Toronto. So for Dwayne De Rosario, one of the lauded, one of the best goal scorers of all time in MLS, to have a son as a goalkeeper, I know that would spark some great conversations. So we'll absolutely get into that here on Inside the Box and speak to some other Canadian legends and other soccer people throughout the run of things. So get involved with us. We're on Instagram, _show. We're on TikTok, Inside the Box Show. On Twitter, on X, inside_the box. And we'll have more content for you here on YouTube each and every week. A podcast that you can enjoy and play whenever you want. So I appreciate you listening as we get inside the box off the ground. It's great to be back here with you. I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers for listening.